Good morning, everybody. This is Alan from OTAC, and I'm joined today uh, by Danelle Moore. Hi, Danelle.
Hi, good morning, everybody.
And I'm also joined by Marilee Bell from the Office of Developmental Disability Services. Hi, Marilee.
Hi, Alan. Hi, Danelle. Good morning, everyone. Happy spring.
Happy spring indeed. Gosh, we've got some gorgeous weather here in the Salem area today. I hope you're enjoying as much sunshine as we are, wherever you might be located today. Thank you all so much for joining us today. We're here to introduce a couple of new support documents that are now available for use in any setting. Um, they will talk about ways that those support documents could be used. Before we get started, I just wanted to give you a quick introduction in case this is your first webinar, or a refresher if you're joining us for the umpteenth time on a webinar. Take a look around your screen and familiarize yourself with the controls that may be available to you. You should find some sort of a webinar control panel. It may look different depending on the type of device that you've connected on. We appreciate the webinar platform that we have the ability to use that lets people get on, whether you're on a tablet or a mobile device, or at your desktop in your cubicle, or wherever that might be. So orient yourself to the control panel. Notice that there should be a place where you can ask questions. Look for that place, and feel free to ask questions anytime during this webinar. We'll be monitoring those questions as they come in, and we'll do our best to answer today. And if we're not able to answer during the webinar, we'd be happy to follow up with you afterwards, of course. Here's a quick overview of what we intend to cover today. We'll spend a few minutes this morning talking about what is now available. We'll talk about how to access them. And we'll talk about the software that is necessary in order to use these particular new versions of forms. We'll talk about why would a support document be helpful, and who writes support documents. Then we're going to take a few minutes to walk through this new general protocol, and we'll walk through the new financial plan. That's our scope and plan for the day. So for the next 56 minutes, it looks like. So we'd like to know who's here with us today in this webinar, and to that end, to give us a little context, we would like to know, in what settings do you provide or receive services? This webinar is open to anyone, and we are interested in which settings you provide or receive services. If there are multiple settings that you provide services in, for instance, or receive services, you can check all that apply. So take just a moment and check the boxes that are on your screen there, and then we'll take a look at those results and see how they look. Looks like 77% of the audience has responded, and it looks like we've got well over 100 individual connections with multiple people at some connections. So we've got several hundred people on this broadcast today. We're glad that you've joined us. All right, with 90% of the votes in, I'm going to close that poll, and let's take a look at who's here. So you can see for yourself, about 57% of the connections in here are folks who either provide or receive services in a residential setting. That includes 24-hour res, of course, supported living, stabilization crisis unit. There are also 12% in another residential setting, that's foster care. Welcome to those foster care providers who may be present. Looks like a number of case management folks are present. So those are either services coordinators or personal agents who have the important responsibilities of facilitating the ISP process and providing services coordination. And then we've got 13% of folks either provide or receive services in an in-home setting. Well, thank you to all of you who are here, and we hope that there's something in these new documents that could be useful to anyone. So let's talk about what's being provided today. We have now published and have we have now posted and have available at OregonISP.org a new financial plan and a new general protocol. This protocol could be tailored to any health or medical issue. We're excited about these updated documents because they put the person's preferences first and foremost to make sure we're really clear about what the person does independently without support, as well as the person's preference for how support is provided. That's essential anytime we're talking about supporting the person. We want to make sure we understand the person's preferences and what's important to the person so that we can effectively balance that with support needs. So like I said, there are new PDF versions of these forms. These forms are all provided in, and I'll cover the software that you'll need to use in order to access these particular versions. All of the forms, oh, my screen is not showing, it says. Okay, so 1 second, we're going to want to fix that. People can see my screen. Oh, I see. Pardon me, it looks like I needed to close that poll. How about that? That should take care of it. Thanks, Danelle, for popping in here and letting me know that that my screen was not sharing. So I'm just going to back up a little bit and show you the slide that I was happily displaying for myself. So this is the new financial plan that we'll be covering and the new general protocol that we'll be covering. And we'll go into each of those in more detail. So all of the forms are now available for download along with accompanying instructions at OregonISP.org, and I'll walk you through getting them and using them over the next couple minutes. First, let's talk about who writes a support document. Support documents, as we understand them and as we've defined them in the Oregon ISP process, are documents that are written by providers. They should always be written by someone who knows and understands the person's support needs. And they should be written by someone who knows about the person's preferences for how they want to be supported. So sometimes that may involve multiple people. One person may have a lot of detailed knowledge about a specific, maybe complex medical issue, and maybe another person has provided supports to the person for a long time and really understands their preferences, even if they don't communicate using words that other people may understand. That we may have learned by observing their actions what works for them and what doesn't work, and so having a support document gives us an opportunity to combine what we understand about the person's preferences as well as what we understand about the person's support needs, and then give clear instructions to providers. As you have the correct software, so let's get right to that available software. If you have not yet downloaded Adobe Reader DC, this would be a great time to do it. It is free software. It's available at the link provided here on the screen, as well as at OregonISP.org. I do want to make one comment. If you're already familiar with the other new ISP forms, maybe you attended the webinar that we hosted with about 600 people present a couple weeks ago, you may recall that we have a new Pro version of certain ISP forms. There is no Pro version of any of these documents. All of these documents work and are designed for the free version of Adobe Reader so that it's most widely accessible to providers who are the primary folks who complete these protocols. So I wanted to just cover some a couple of quick steps as you're following the instructions at Adobe to download Adobe Acrobat Reader DC. We encourage you to carefully review these additional offers that they offer you. They offer to install an extension on your web browser. That is not required. We encourage you to uncheck any of those boxes. Also, optional offers like installing McAfee Security Scan or Intel TrueKey. You make your own decision about whether that's right for you. We don't need those, and we find that our systems, we already have security software, and it could just conflict with systems. So we encourage you to uncheck any of those offers that you don't need. None of those are required in order to use this document or any of the materials that we provide. Once that's finished, go ahead and click the Install Now button that will be glowing in your, on your screen, and it will walk you through install process. If you need more help with how to install, there is an FAQ document that's published, and it's posted at OregonISP.org on our Adobe Forms page. You can follow all the links around OregonISP.org that point you toward more help with accessing Adobe software. Wanted to circle one more time through why would we actually use a support document? Why would we write a support document? One important reason is to provide clear instructions to supporters. What we know is that when people are supported by multiple providers, there may be turnover or even staff rotation during a normal course of a day. And when you've got multiple care providers supporting someone, especially around serious health or medical risks, having consistency in how those supports are provided is so important. So providing clear instructions, also to be able to clearly indicate the person's preference about how to be supported. Danelle, can you share any experience about that? Oh, Danelle is still muted. She would tell you about a person that she supported in their own home who had very clear personal preferences about how to be supported during a seizure, and it was so important to him. When they actually talked to him about writing a protocol for providers, he said, "Oh no, I wouldn't want that." But then when they talked to him about how that protocol can help him make sure that his wishes are clearly communicated to the providers that he's chosen to hire, that sealed the deal, and that was very important. So he wrote the protocol himself and said, "This is how I want you to support me around my seizures." That's one example, and there are certainly many other examples of how a support document could be used. Of course, when you have rotating caregivers, it's also important to just increase that consistency and accountability around providing supports, particularly around those high risks or serious risks. Let's cover a couple of new features in these PDF versions. When I open the form, you'll see that there are some function icons at the top that give you some basic functions throughout the document. These documents will autofill information like the person's name and their preferred gender pronouns. You can press Control-E, that's a magic key combination. Control-E, I remember the word edit, like I want to more richly edit the text. So Control-E to edit, it'll open a text properties toolbar, and that will let you do things like add bulleted lists or add bold or italics or other things that can help make the document more easy for caregivers to understand. And I'll also demonstrate that there's on-screen help text that can guide you throughout the document. We've tried to embed instructions right onto the form so that if somebody new is who has an understanding of the person and has an understanding of the support needs of the person. If somebody new is being asked to write a protocol, they could look at the protocol and understand, or financial plan, and understand what's being expected there. So let's actually walk through the document now. And to do that, I'm going to go right over to the website. At OregonISP.org. So here's the front page of OregonISP.org, and if I come up here to Provided Forms and I scroll down to Support Documents, that's going to get me where I want to go. So as you can see, we have the general protocol available right now. We also have the financial plan available right now. And there's a little note about issue-specific protocols that we are anticipating releasing aspiration, choking, constipation, dehydration, seizures, and pica in this new format later this summer. As soon as we have more timelines of when the DHS publications team wraps up their work on those, we'll announce that and we'll get those posted right up here. So let's start with this general protocol. So I'm going to come right over here. This has, because this is now published by the Office of Developmental Disability Services through DHS, it has an official form number. So when you click this, if you get a message like this that says, please wait, and yet you say, hey, but I already installed Adobe Reader. I can even see that Danelle, I'm on Danelle's computer right now, and she has Adobe Reader installed. But why did it open with this please wait? That's because these documents this document actually tried to open here in her web browser. Some of you may have your web browser, or your web browser may have defaulted to those settings to try to be helpful and open the PDF in your web browser. But it's not going to work in your web browser. You're going to want to, here using Firefox, I see this PDF contains forms. It's not supported. Open with a different viewer, and that gives me the option then to open it using Adobe Reader DC. Another way you could go is right up here, I see a little download icon. Take a moment to actually download that. If you download it to your computer and then open it wherever you saved it, maybe on your desktop or in a folder special for these documents, wherever you found it, wherever you downloaded it, then go and open it, and you should have no problem using it if you have downloaded Adobe Acrobat Reader DC. So let's get this document open. I'm going to say open with a different viewer, and I'm going to open it directly here into Adobe Reader DC. And here it is. So this is the issue-specific protocol, or the general protocol. And across the top, there are a couple of function icons. There's a print button that will hide unnecessary portions of the form and prepare the document for printing. If you need a completely new copy of the protocol, for perhaps you've made a number of changes to it and you would just like to start fresh, you can click this little button and it will actually take you right back and download a clean copy of it so that you can start from scratch. So that's another option for you. I'm going to just zoom in a little bit here so you can see a little bit better. There's help text throughout the document, that purple text, and you do have the ability to toggle it on or off as you go. We encourage you, especially if you're getting to know these documents, keep that help text on. It's always visible. It'll only be visible on screen. That purple text will never print. It's only for on-screen use. At the top of this document it says fill in the name of the risk or issue. So the intent here is that you design this in a way that works best for the person. So this might be my bee sting protocol. And as soon as I tab out of that field, it adjusts, so it'll be nice and nicely formatted. So maybe this is a protocol here for me, and this might be for use at home, or it could be for use at home and school. or you can type in whatever you wish, or of course you can choose something from the drop-down or just type in as you wish. It also asks for the person's preferred name, Alan, and my preferred pronoun is he, and that this may have been written by mom and dad, or this might have been written by my caregiver, Danelle. Thanks, Danelle, for the great care that you're providing for me today. She's letting me use her computer. And there's also, of course, a place to indicate the date of the document. Throughout the section, then, there's place to describe the issue, how we know it's a risk for the person, and what does the person do for himself regarding the issue, and what's Alan's preference for how to be supported around this issue. These are, for those of you who were familiar with the previous protocol versions, this is new content, and it's so important. People who did protocols well with earlier versions understood that this information was necessary and were figuring that out, but this provides a little bit more prompting and a little bit more coaching so that we all remember that that even if we're talking about an issue of serious health and safety, we still always want to listen to what's important to the person, and if necessary, talk about it as a team to figure out how we're going to best support the person to honor their preferences and balance the important support needs. I just want to point out something consistent on every one of these documents. There is a quirk that's just inherent with using this PDF format, that as you are typing into this document, it may feel like the information you're typing is getting cut off. I've actually typed quite a lot in here now, and yet all you're seeing is a little bit. If that's happening to you and that is expected, just tab out of that or click out of that field and it will immediately adjust. And then, of course, you can continue going all you wish, and you're free to either scroll while you're in there or just click outside and it immediately will adjust to what you need. So section 2 on the protocol is about steps to take to prevent harm due to this issue. And I just want to acknowledge that that we are coming right up on 10 o'clock, and we're sorry about the technical glitch that happened, but we will continue for about another 15 minutes or so to make up for the time that we missed. To those of you who aren't able to stay on with us past the 10 o'clock hour, the webinar will be recorded. So we're just going to continue until we finish our walkthrough of the two documents, and thank you to those of you who may have to leave now. Steps to take to prevent harm. So our first approach when we're designing a protocol is to think about what can be done to prevent this issue, or what are the proactive steps that can be taken. So spell out any and all of those, and you can add as many additional as you choose. Just click that plus, and if you want to reorder them, you can use these little arrows to juggle things around, and if you realize you added a little bit too much, you can remove rows. What I want to mention is when it comes to removing content like this, you do get a pretty strong warning here. That's because there is no undo feature for removing rows. So think carefully before you start removing things. You can type and delete and actually Control-Z to undo a bit, but undo is limited, especially around removing these individual rows or content on the documents. So we've focused on section 1. What do we understand about this issue and the person's preferences? Section 2, we talked about proactive responses. Section 3 then describes what is the expected response. Describe the specific steps that caregivers are expected to follow, or if they're expected to contact somebody else for further instructions, you want to include that. So this is written in a basically an if-then sort of approach. So you write it in terms of if any of these things are observed, then take this action. For instance, if Alan gets stung by a bee, then administer EpiPen in his thigh as trained, for instance. And then maybe there's even another step of the next thing you're supposed to do is monitor his reaction for the next 15 minutes and call his nurse when you can. So just for example, other things could be if Alan has a full body tonic-clonic seizure, and we could go on and describe. So you can see how we could go a number of different ways. If we were writing a diabetes protocol, it might be Alan's blood sugar is over 250, then we would describe the steps that were. So you can imagine many different scenarios, and you can include the specific responses in here, and if there are different symptoms that may be observed in different situations, you can add those here, or of course you might only have one scenario on this, and it will reduce down to just one set of instructions. What you'll see once those issue-specific protocols come out, they will be pre-filled with a number of content, all of which you can edit freely or remove as needed. Those of you who are already familiar with the currently published seizure, pica, aspiration, choking, constipation, dehydration protocols, you'll see most all of the content that's currently on them, but it will all be in this format, and you can edit it as needed so that you're really tailoring it to the person. So this is the expected response from caregivers at this location. And then we move to section 4. Are there any circumstances when caregivers need to call 911? Of course, this one is pre-built in. If Alan appears gravely ill or you're concerned about his immediate health and safety, we think that's a given. So you'll always see that on these protocols. Other than that, if there's anything else unique and special about this situation, about Alan's bee sting protocol, if Alan turns blue and or stops breathing, for instance, then we would want to call 911. If there was no other specific situation when you need to call 911, you can simply remove that so that you have only this one predefined bullet point. And there's one final section, and this is about expected follow-up. So this is what's expected of caregivers later. Maybe after the event occurs, after things have subsided. This is a good place to talk about documentation that may be needed, or further contact, such as notifying Alan's nurse now that he's stable, or giving his doctor a call, or maybe it's that the doctor. I supported a person whose doctor wanted to know if she had more than a certain number of seizures over the course of a 6-month period. That if that happened, then we could spell that out. So we could say if Susie has 5 or more seizures in a 6-month period, notify her neurologist. Notice we don't predefine these things because we really, you come up with these strategies on a person-by-person basis, but the point here is that these documents can be highly tailored to exactly what is expected, and you want to always focus the language on these documents so that it's focused to the direct care provider's role. What is it that the that the frontline staff or caregivers need to know in order to provide good care. So that is a walk through the protocol. Danelle, were there any questions that we need to address here? Oh, and of course, she can't actually speak into the webinar, so so I'm trusting that that questions are being responded to left and right, and of course, for any question that we can't get to today, we'd be happy to follow up with you after the webinar. Folks, I'm going to do a quick walk through the financial plan now, and then we'll be wrapping up. So here comes the financial plan. I'm just going to tell my web browser to open with Adobe Reader DC, and here's that document. Consistent information across the top. This is similar to what you find on the protocol, as well as on even the person-centered information. Much of it is the same. So so that should look familiar. You're going to see very similar things right here in this section 1. That's why we bothered to call it section 1. It's just really just like the protocol. So you're going to briefly describe the person's financial support needs, any support needs that we understand at this location. Remember that support documents are designed to be written for a specific location. So anything that we need to know at this location. This is my financial plan at work. It's possible. So, oh, and if I fill out person's name throughout, of course, you'll see how that updates the entire document, just personalizing it that much more. So you'll see questions about what does Alan do for himself regarding financial management? And what's Alan's preference for how to be supported with his finances? And what's Alan's preference for what to spend his money on? So all of those are just pre-built onto this financial plan. And then you'll find that all the rest of the whole rest of the document all fits into what we call section 2, steps to take to safeguard Alan's finances. And it's broken into a series of little sections, and most of this content is dynamic or responsive. It'll only show up if it applies to that person, if you indicate that it applies. So for instance, if I had a representative payee, you check that box and provide that name. And if you want more information about representative payee, I do want to point out the instructions that we've provided. I'm just going to take a quick detour and show you the instructions that are provided. These documents are provided. There's about 2-page instructions for each of these documents. And so, for instance, here is information about representative payees. If the person receives benefits through Social Security and they need assistance with financial management, they might have a representative payee. And there's information about representative payees, and you can get more information right there. You can also get information, we've got a link also for information about resource limits, which you'll see in just a moment. Okay, is the person independent with handling any amount of money? We always want to know what the person does independently. And if so, we just indicate that here. If not, there's a little pop-up that comes up. If no, consider a desired outcome in the ISP to promote more independence. We always want to support the person to be as independent as possible. And who's responsible for reporting Alan's wages to Social Security? If that applies in this case, then check that box. If for whatever reason we don't report, then you could leave that unchecked. Budgeting and personal expense. Budgeting personal expenses. Does Alan want support with budgeting or planning priorities? If either yes or no. If yes, you describe it or you indicate where that budget information is located. Are there any supports in place at this location to prevent Alan from exceeding financial resource limits. So again, this is where we've defined financial resource limits in those instructions. So just to pop back over here, if the person receives SSI or supplemental security income, there is a resource limit. It's a different amount depending on if you're single or if you're married, and you can learn about those resources right here. It's a very simple, simple definition and description of those important limits. So if there are supports in this place to prevent exceeding financial resource limits, then just describe that. What does that look like? Are there purchases where additional review, action, or notification will occur? So, and it gives, if I say yes, it gives an example. For example, do certain team members need to be notified for expenditures over a certain amount in a period of time? So describe those circumstances and describe what review, action, or notification will occur. What's expected from the team of people that support this person? Next, we move on to receipts. Check any of these boxes that apply. Only the ones that you check will print on the final financial plan. So, so no receipts are expected, or maybe receipts are required for purchases made by support staff on behalf of Alan. But also maybe receipts are not required in these circumstances. So maybe vending machines. What else might that look like? And any other comments about receipts? How and when they're kept, where they're stored, who is responsible for reviewing them? You could go any number of directions with that, and we wanted to provide flexible space for you to be able to record the supports that are in place. Now, some more information about what happens at this provider location. And we said at this provider location because what we recognize is the person may have chosen this provider to provide certain supports and may ask this provider to provide certain supports. Maybe if this is a work provider, they may be supporting the person with handling a bit of cash on a day-to-day basis to make sure that the person is able to get the lunch that they want or something like that. And so the person may have other accounts, but we're not asking that provider that the person is hired for a specific issue to necessarily know about other things that the person might not have shared, or that they're not providing any supports within that area. So check what is in place at this location. And so whatever you were to check, if you checked, for instance, a checking account and a savings account and cash and an ATM or debit card, all that are provided, that supports are provided at this location, then you use the space down here to describe how direct support staff supports the person with these things, and as well how provider management supports the person with that. So there may be different roles between support staff who make sure that the person who support the person to budget and who support the person to do their banking on a routine basis, and maybe management provides oversight and assists with, maybe has a safe that they keep some money on site, or other tools. And then describe the manner and frequency of reconciliation of program managed financial records. What oversight is in place? Who else helps look at or audit or review the records that you're doing to make sure that we're safeguarding the person's funds? So describe what procedures are in place for that. That may include internal QA audits. That might also include quarterly or other review from the CDDP or the services coordinator. Might include an agency bookkeeper. How do I spell? So there could be lots of procedures that you have in place, and we definitely want to encourage you to describe what's in place to provide that oversight of your records. Next, we move into income and expenses section. I want to be clear that this is intended to be an approximate, a big picture look at the person's income and expenses, and is not designed to replace the data tracking that if you're handling the person's money or helping the person manage their money, you would likely have other detailed accounting of money that comes in, money that goes out. This is not intended to replace that, but rather to help the person and their support team have a big picture look at where money comes from and where money goes. As such, we wouldn't expect that you have to get in and adjust these as there are maybe month-to-month shifts in exact expenditures, but rather to focus on the big picture of where does the person's income come from? Is it Social Security and the approximate amount, and if the person also working at OTAC, and you could have a dollar amount per month. And so indicating these broad categories of income and expense. I'll mention that room and board and medications are pre-filled out in here. However, they're fully editable. They don't have to be there if they don't apply to this person. Again, everything you should find is highly customizable to the person's specific needs. The document wraps up with a section on assets. If the person, if the provider maintains a personal property record, which may be required under administrative rule in certain settings, indicate that here, and at what value are items recorded there, and it indicates already, or any items of sentimental value. So you could indicate a dollar amount, for instance, and make sure you're familiar with your organization's policy on personal property records as well as administrative rules. And it asks, does Alan want support to maintain any other assets? If yes, describe that. Examples include burial plan, life insurance policy, retirement account, an ABLE account, or other types of accounts or assets that the person may be asking this provider to provide supports with. Finally, there's an additional information section that can be used as a catch-all for anything else that that is necessary. The focus of this document should be on making sure that supporters understand clearly what's expected of them and what the person wants support with in their life in the area of finances. Folks, we hope this walkthrough of the financial plan and of the new protocol has been helpful to you. Again, we apologize for the brief interruption in the middle of our webinar. Thank you for that. If you have any final questions, we're going to keep the webinar open for just another moment so that we can at least get those questions in, and we'll try to answer a couple of them if you stay online. Otherwise, we will follow up with you after this webinar to respond to remaining questions. If you need verification of attendance and participation in this webinar, you will receive everybody who was registered to attend and who connected live during this webinar will receive a follow-up email. That email is the only verification of attendance that we're able to provide for this event. So I say thank you so much for your attendance and for your participation today. Please complete that short survey that's going to pop up in your web browser once this webinar ends. Thank you all so much, and Marilee, thank you for joining us, and on behalf of Danelle and I here at the OTAC office, we're so grateful that you joined us. Thank you, everyone, and thanks, Marilee.